fans, what's going on? Welcome back to Overruled, the podcast where legal talk meets real talk, and the gavel drops with just a hint of side-eye. This week, we're calling out the nonsense, spotlighting the cases that matter, and dragging the dusty laws that somehow still exist. From a bakery battle that could change civil rights law, to haunted house disclosures, to folks in power telling us to dream smaller, we are not keeping it quiet. Not today, not ever. Period. So whether you're new here or you've been riding with me since episode 1, go ahead and take your seat because class is officially in session and this court is in full effect. Let's get into it. Welcome to Issues on the Docket, the segment where we pull up the legal receipts, examine the fine print, and serve up the courtroom tea. This week, we're talking about state-level power plays, corporate accountability, and what it really means when your rights are protected, but only on paper. Let's get into it, y'all. Our first story comes out of Texas, where a Texas judge blocks part of a controversial immigration law. Now, let me set the scene for you. Earlier this year, Texas passed Senate Bill 4, a law that would allow state officials, not federal agents, to arrest and deport undocumented immigrants. That move set off a legal stream of alarm bells across the country. Well, now a federal judge has temporarily blocked part of the law, saying, no, Texas, that's not how the law works. And that's for damn sure not how immigration law works. So for added context, SB 4 basically deputizes law enforcement to play ICE agent, even though immigration enforcement is squarely a federal responsibility. The law allowed for police to arrest individuals simply for being suspected of being in the country illegally, and empowered judges to issue de facto deportation orders. You know, the ones that we've been seeing all over the news. This is all some serious jurisdiction jumping. Now, from a legal perspective, the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution gives the federal government sole authority over immigration, period. This isn't the first time Texas has tried to flex its muscle on immigration. And are we surprised? Absolutely not. Remember the show me your papers laws? I'm sure some of the listeners, parents, or they even experienced that to this day. And with that being said, this latest push could have created 50 mini immigration systems across the United States, starting with Texas. The judge agreed, ruling that the state overstepped its bounds and created an unconstitutional conflict with federal law. Round of applause for a judge with some common sense, y'all. But they're not in the majority. They are the minority. Here's the thing. This isn't just about legal turf, okay? What states' rights can be. It's about real people's lives. Empowering local police to detain based on immigration suspicion opens the door to rampant racial profiling, as if we need more of that in this country. It also further erodes trust between immigrant communities and law enforcement. How do you call for help if the person you're calling might throw you in a cage? Make it make sense. How, Sway? How? So, the fight for SB 4 isn't over. It's headed to higher courts. But ask yourself this: what happens when states treat human beings like political statements? And why do we keep pretending that human rights stop at the border? Human rights are human rights. We still can't seem to get that here in the United States. Our next story comes out of California, where the state is suing big oil for decades of climate lies. With some reporting from The Guardian, this story came about really to talk about the major lawsuit that California has launched against 5 of the biggest oil companies, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, BP, and ConocoPhillips. We've seen all of those brands before, alleging they deliberately misled the public about climate change for over 50 years. Oh, wait, and yes, California brought the receipts. So let's get into it. The lawsuit itself, it claims that internal documents from as far back as the 1970s show oil execs knew exactly how much fossil fuels were harming the planet. And instead of pivoting, they funded denial campaigns, hired PR firms to spin the doubt, and lobbied like hell to block regulation. Does this sound familiar? Think big tobacco or the rifle and the gun industry. But this particularly involves hurricanes and global destruction, natural disasters, global warming, all of those things that they knew about. California is using public nuisance law, arguing that these companies created widespread harm, rising sea levels, extreme heat, wildfires, while misleading the public. It's also invoking fraud and deceptive trade practices, which gives this case a lot more teeth to sink in. If the court sides with California, this could crack open a new era of corporate climate accountability. And you know what? We could go for some of that in this day and age. We need to hold these companies accountable. And of course, this isn't just about the lawsuit itself. It's about the consequences of these corporations. Oil companies have raked in record-breaking profits while communities burn, literally, to the ground, flood, and suffocate. Let's be honest, the most impacted folks are often low-income, Black, brown, and indigenous communities who had zero say in these decisions. So while Exxon's busy buying Super Bowl ads about innovation, California is saying, run us our damages. Now, if companies can knowingly profit from harm while gaslighting the public, what does the truth even mean when it comes to advertising? And who's left to pay the price when the smoke clears, quite literally? It won't be these companies. Matter of fact, they taking all your money straight to the bank. Our last story comes out of Massachusetts, where they have moved to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution. With some great reporting coming from the Boston Globe. In the wake of the Roe v. Wade decision being overturned, Massachusetts is stepping up to the plate. Lawmakers just advanced a proposal to explicitly protect abortion access in the state constitution, potentially putting reproductive rights beyond the reach of future political flip-flops. Now, Massachusetts, they've already had statutory protections in place for abortion, but those laws could be repealed by future legislations. A constitutional amendment, however, would lock in the right to reproductive health care at the state level, no matter who's in office or what happens federally. AKA, they're going to have more protections, the constituents and the people in general of the state of Massachusetts. This is all good, okay? Or at least you should be thinking this is all good. If you don't, then I'm wondering, why are you listening to this damn podcast? Anyway, to pass, the amendment must clear the state legislature twice in 2 separate sessions. And then it goes to a public ballot for voters, which those people will decide. This is similar to what we've seen in states like Michigan, Vermont, and California. Now, it's a big lift, but if it goes through, it sets a precedent for proactive rather than reactive rights protection. What the state of Massachusetts is doing right now, it is not merely a legislative move. It is a visionary move. Massachusetts is showing that states can actually lead on protecting rights, not just restricting them or listening to what administration of varying flavors has to say. This really matters when it's especially used for good. Because if your rights can be voted away in a single election cycle, then baby, they were never really rights in the first place. Just privileges on a timer. So whether you live in Massachusetts or not, ask yourself, are your rights secure? Are you secure? Or are they just temporarily tolerated? And what could your state be doing to actually lead instead of lag behind and be a straggler? All right, y'all, that wraps up today's issues on the docket. From Texas's overreach to big oil companies gaslighting and Massachusetts laying down a constitutional blueprint, we're seeing the law used as both a sword and a shield. The key? Vigilance. Stay vigilant, because rights only matter if we protect them before they're gone. Let me know what stories caught your eye this week. Tag us on social or email your legal hot takes to the Overruled podcast at gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Overruled Podcast. And on YouTube, The Overruled Podcast. Shameless plug, but get into it. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with our next segment, Precedent Pending. Oh, hey there. Welcome back, folks. Three numbers, y'all, surround one very controversial decision and the human rights landscape. Before we get started, let me tell you a quick story. Picture it. Shout out to those who know the Golden Girls. That was clearly a Sophia reference for those of you who may not know the character of the iconic show, The Golden Girls. Actually, thank you for being a friend by listening to me right now. You work. I appreciate you. Okay, back to the story, though, that I was about to tell you. See, the rants. It happens. Anyway, let me tell you a quick story. All right. Listen. Imagine walking into a bakery with your fiancé, excited to design the perfect wedding cake, only to be told, we don't serve your kind of wedding. Excuse me? That is exactly what happened to a lesbian couple in California. In California, Eileen and Maria Rodriguez del Rio, where they tried to buy a simple white cake for their celebration. The bakery's owner, citing her Christian beliefs, refused to sell them even a plain, pre-made cake upon learning that it was for a same-sex wedding.
Excuse me?
Oh my God. The couple left stunned and humiliated, and soon filed a complaint under the state's anti-discrimination law. This scene may sound like a rerun of past culture war dramas. It's definitely not the first of its kind, but it is unfolding right now, supercharged by a recent Supreme Court decision. Last year, in 303 Creative LLC versus Elenis, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a business offering custom expressive services, in that case, wedding websites, wedding cakes, has a First Amendment right to refuse work that conflicts with the owner's religious beliefs. The ruling, handed down 6-3 by the court's conservative majority, sent shockwaves through the legal landscape. It essentially held that state anti-discrimination laws, which normally require businesses open to the public to serve all customers equally, they cannot compel an artist or creative professional to create speech or art celebrating something they oppose. In even plainer terms, y'all, if what you're selling is expressive, whether it's speech, art, design, you name it, you might now have a constitutional exemption from laws that bar discrimination against LGBTQ people and other protected groups. That, for people with sense, should be concerning. On today's episode of Overruled, we're zooming in on the key legal battles now brewing in the wake of the 303 creative decision. We'll focus on a major pending case that could set a new precedent, a case that asks, how far does this free speech exemption go? Can a baker, a florist, a photographer, you name it, refuse LGBT customers by saying their work is art and their faith won't allow it? We'll break down the arguments on this, on both sides actually, in plain English. Explore the real world stakes for LGBTQ plus folks, myself included, and beyond. And share a couple of personal stories that are going to show you what these lawsuits mean for people's lives. Strap in. This is a fight at the crossroads of religious liberty, free expression, and the basic dignity of equal service. Welcome to Precedent Pending. The court's ruling in 303 Creative was a game changer, or at least many believe it to be. But to understand why, we need to recap what that case decided and why it's opened the door to a slew of new lawsuits. In 303 Creative, the Supreme Court sided with Lori Smith, a Colorado web designer who proactively challenged her state's public accommodations law. Colorado, like many states, has an anti-discrimination law that says if you run a business open to the public, you can't just turn away customers because of traits like race, gender, or sexual orientation. Smith, a devout Christian, had no issue serving LGBTQ clients for general graphic design work. But she wanted to start designing wedding websites in particular, and to publicly announce she would not create sites for same-sex weddings due to her belief that marriage is only between a man and a woman. This construct that we've created, only made for a man and a woman. Okay, Lori girl. Essentially, she asked the courts, can Colorado force me to make gay wedding websites under its anti-bias law? She argued that doing so would compel her to express a message she fundamentally disagrees with, a violation of her free speech rights. Okay, here's the twist. No same-sex couple had actually requested her services at all. Smith's case was a pre-enforcement challenge, a hypothetical dispute staged to get a legal answer, and it worked. In June of 2023, the Supreme Court ruled that Colorado cannot compel Smith to create a website celebrating a same-sex wedding, because that would force her to speak a message through her custom design and words, contrary to her beliefs. The court majority, led by Justice Neil Gorsuch, framed Smith as an artist. They compared her to a speechwriter or a filmmaker who cannot be forced to convey a story or sentiment against their will. This woman was making websites, y'all. But anyway, Gorsuch even offered vivid analogies. The government can't make an unwilling Muslim director film with a Zionist, or make a Zionist movie, or force an atheist painter to paint biblical scenes. These are all things that he wrote. To do so, Gorsuch stated, would not respect the First Amendment. More nearly, it would spell its demise. In short, the free speech clause got the final word. In this context, it trumped the state's power to outlaw LGBTQ discrimination by businesses. But that's not the whole story, y'all. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, in a fiery dissent, joined by the court's two other liberals, castigated the ruling as a new license to discriminate. Bingo. For the first time in its history, she noted, the Supreme Court was granting a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse service to members of a protected class. Sotomayor recounted how, in case after case over the past half century, businesses tried to use the First Amendment on religious freedom to dodge civil rights laws, whether to deny service to Black Americans, women, religious minorities, you name it. And those attempts were unanimously rejected by the court until now. She warned that 303 Creative sets a dangerous precedent. And I quote, "Today, the court, for the first time in its history, grants a business open to the public a constitutional right to refuse to serve members of a protected class." Sotomayor subsequently called this decision heartbreaking and a reactionary exclusion that causes immediate symbolic harm to LGBTQ people. And I gotta say, I totally agree with that. So we have a sharply divided interpretation here. The majority sees it as upholding free speech for artists. The minority sees it as opening the door to lawful discrimination. And that, my friends, brings us to right now. In the wake of 303 Creative, religiously motivated businesses and their lawyers have been emboldened to push the limits of this ruling. They are filing new lawsuits or reviving old ones to carve out more exceptions in anti-discrimination laws, particularly those protecting LGBTQ individuals. 303 Creative didn't answer every question, and it raised plenty more. What counts as expressive work, for instance? Does selling a generic product count, or does it have to be custom art? Can the exemption extend to any service as long as the owner voices a religious objection? We're about to explore a pending case here that sits right at the intersection of these questions. Okay, so let's go back to that story I told you about at the very beginning of the segment. The culture war over same-sex wedding cakes didn't end with Colorado's famous Masterpiece Cake Shop case. I know you all are surely aware of that case because it caused such huge waves. If not, pull over, do a quick Google, and I'll be here when you get back. Now, moving back to the topic at hand. This culture war, it's back. And this time, it's in California, one of the most liberal states in the United States. Our focal case involves Tastries Bakery, a family-run shop in Bakersfield, California, owned by Kathy Miller. Tastries. I don't even like the way that rolls off the tongue. I don't know about y'all, but Tastries? It sounds like the type of place where their cakes are dry. You know? It just tastes a little off. You know what I'm saying? Tastries. Anyway, moving on. If that name sounds vaguely familiar to you, it's because this case has drawn comparisons to the Masterpiece Cake Shop saga from a few years ago. but it's taking its own path through the courts, now under the shadow of 303 Creative, which I just told you about. Here's what happened. In August 2017, Eileen and Maria Rodriguez Del Rio walked into Tastry's bakery to pick out a cake for their upcoming wedding. They found a design that they liked, a pre-designed 3-tier white cake that the bakery sold for birthdays and other occasions. And they arranged to come back with the family for a tasting. When they returned a week later, cake sample in mouth, ready to purchase, they got an unpleasant surprise. Upon learning that the cake was for a lesbian wedding, owner Kathy Miller refused to sell it to them outright. Miller, a devout Christian, explained that her shop's policy, grounded in her faith, was not to facilitate same-sex marriage celebrations. She even had a written policy. Wedding cakes must not contradict God's sacrament of marriage between one man and one woman, as she later told the courts. And I say to you, imagine walking up to a place like that and seeing a sign posted. I'm absolutely out. You ain't even got to worry about me spending money. Even if you have the most delicious looking cakes in the world, baby, I'm not giving you shit. You don't even care about me as a human being or my community. It's a job. But anyway, importantly, and this is a key detail, y'all. The cake the couple requested was not asking for rainbow decorations, 2 brides at the top, or any sort of overt message. It was a standard, basic cake design. No custom writing even, just identical to the ones the bakery sold to other customers at any time. Essentially an a la carte cake. Miller objected purely because of the event it would be used for, which would be a same-sex wedding, and what that wedding represented. She did not say she wouldn't sell to gay people at all. In fact, she says she has a lot of LGBTQ customers, and even employees. This sounds, I gotta pull over here, Joshua again. This sounds very reminiscent to those people that we've experienced in life where they say, oh, I love Black people. I have a Black friend. I'm not racist. Oh, I love the trans. Oh my goodness. I love, what's RuPaul? Ain't she trans? Like, it's that kind of stuff, okay, that perpetuates the notion that you actually do have an issue and you're trying to mask it by saying, oh, well, you know, I can tolerate this little aspect. Frustrating, but that's America, folks. Now, Kathy Miller's stance continued. She said, I will serve anyone for most things, but I cannot, in good conscience, participate in a gay wedding by providing a cake for it. To soften the blow, y'all, Miller referred Eileen and Maria to another bakery that she said would handle their order. Not you giving me a referral. You think I want a referral from you? Absolutely not. Look, she stated, I know this is important. There's another baker up the road. They're just as good as I am. Let me help you place your order with them. Wow. These are statements her lawyer recounts Miller saying in court. In Miller's view, this wasn't about hate or personal animus. It was about staying true to her faith. Her attorney noted that Kathy also won't create cakes with designs she finds morally objectionable in other contexts. If you ask her, for instance, to make a marijuana cake or marijuana cookies, she'll say no. Or if it's a really gory birthday cake or a really gory Halloween type cake, she'll say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. By her account, designing a cake to honor a same-sex marriage falls into horror and marijuana.
All right.
Got it. Nonetheless, for Eileen and Maria, the refusal felt deeply personal. Do you blame them for feeling that way? Suddenly being told, no, we can't serve your wedding because of who they are, was, in their words, dehumanizing. If that emotional toll sounds abstract, don't worry, consider another story I've got for you. Colorado couple David Mullins and Charlie Craig were turned away by Masterpiece Cake Shop back in 2012. Mullins said, "We were just mortified and embarrassed. It was especially painful because Craig's mother was with them, witnessing her son be rejected. You don't want your mom to see you go through something like that," Mullins recounted. Craig's mom later wrote, "As a parent, I felt I had failed him. Seeing her son's shoulders shake as they walked back to the car. That kind of hurt, it doesn't vanish. Many of us know that from firsthand experience." Mullins recalled how it really sticks with you, making him even hesitate to mention the word husband in everyday situations for fear of how people might react. The point is, being refused service in general for who you love isn't a trivial matter, and it should not be considered as one. It strikes at one's dignity and sense of belonging. Now, back in Bakersfield, with old Kathy, the Rodriguez Del Rios filed a complaint with California's Civil Rights Department, the CRD, within weeks of being denied their cake. California's law, called the UNRRA Civil Rights Act, is crystal clear that businesses open to the public cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, among other traits. The state investigated and found cause, and by 2018, it brought a lawsuit against Tastries Bakery and Kathy Miller for violating the law. Thus began a legal tug of war that has now spanned 6 going on 7 years. You might just be thinking here, didn't the Supreme Court already handle a wedding cake case? Yes, you are right. That was the aforementioned Masterpiece Cake Shop v. Colorado case in 2018. But that ruling was a narrow one, resolved only on a technicality. The court dodged the big question by finding Colorado's Civil Rights Commission showed bias against the baker's religion, thus invalidating that particular element of enforcement. Masterpiece never established a broad right to refuse service. In fact, before 303 Creative, no high court precedent squarely allowed what Kathy Miller is seeking: a First Amendment exemption from an anti-discrimination law for a commercial business. She's breaking ground, but not in a good way. But after 303 Creative, Miller's side felt the wind at their backs. And indeed, when the Tastries case first went to trial in a California state court in 2021, the judge ruled in Miller's favor. The trial court accepted the argument that Miller wasn't really discriminating against people so much as declining to express a message. In the judge's view, Miller's policy, no cakes for same-sex weddings, was identity neutral because ostensibly she'd refuse a gay couple or a straight friend trying to buy a cake for a gay wedding, just the same. The court also noted that Miller did refer the couple elsewhere, as if that was supposed to mitigate the denial. Essentially, the judge bought the claim that no actual unequal treatment occurred, since Miller would sell the exact same cake to the women if it were for, let's say, a birthday party, just not for a gay wedding. By that logic, forcing her to provide the cake for a same-sex marriage would compel her to endorse something she religiously disagrees with. Okay, wow. This was a huge win for Miller and a major loss for the state and the couple. The $135,000 in damages the women initially sought was off the table, and the ruling threatened to put a crack in California's stout civil rights protections. Unsurprisingly, the state of California appealed. Now fast forward to early 2025, and a California appellate court reversed that very trial ruling decisively. In a 74-page opinion, the 3-judge panel upheld the core principle that full and equal access means LGBTQ customers can't be shunted aside, even with polite referrals. The appellate court made several key points. 1, this was outright discrimination, which go off. Thank you, court. Thank you. Thank you, appellate court. The bakery's no same-sex weddings policy isn't neutral. It only ever kicks in to deny services sought by LGBTQ people or their events. That's intentional discrimination based on sexual orientation, plain and simple. 2, a generic cake is not speech. Requiring Miller to sell the same cake she would sell to any other customer doesn't force her to make an artistic statement or endorse anything. The judges noted that reproducing a pre-made, ordinary, off-the-shelf product, something totally indistinguishable from any other cake off the shelf, that cannot be magically turned into the artistic self-expression of the designer, just because of who is buying the cake. In a memorable line, the court wrote that stretching the First Amendment to cover routinely produced, ordinary commercial products as protected speech is unworkably overbroad. I agree. In other words, y'all, if that were speech, then virtually any act of commerce could be labeled expression and dodge the law. The California Court of Appeal thereby vacated the trial decision that was in favor of the bakery. This was a big victory for civil rights advocates, and really it set up a potential clash with the logic of 303 Creative. After all, one could ask, if a custom website is speech, why isn't a custom cake? Where do we draw the line between an expressive service and a regular commercial good? The Supreme Court in 303 Creative emphasized the highly individualized, message-bearing nature of those wedding websites. The California court stressed the mundane, ordinary nature of the cake at issue. This distinction, expressive content versus standard product, may well be the next big fault line here. And how it's resolved will affect not just wedding vendors, but possibly a broad swath of businesses. Be prepared for this shocker. At this point, Kathy Miller, through her lawyers at the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty, is vowing to fight on. They plan to appeal to the California Supreme Court and potentially beyond. This case is not just about Kathy Miller. It's about protecting the rights of all Americans to live and work according to their deeply held beliefs, one of her attorneys said. They argue that freedom of religion and expression are on the line for creative professionals. If the state can compel Kathy to make that cake, what's stopping it from forcing, say, a Christian singer to perform at a same-sex ceremony, or a Jewish calligrapher to design flyers for a neo-Nazi rally? Anyone see any issues with these? If we thought critically about both of those situations, the likelihood of them happening, the individuals involved who would participate willingly because they are being hired for a service. But we're not talking about that, right? Oh, okay. All right. Those are the kinds of slippery slope hypotheticals that are often raised. Miller's team frames her not as someone denying people, but denying a message. And they insist that tolerance is a two-way street. That's rich coming from them. That society should also tolerate the sincere religious dissenters, even if it means a couple has to go to a different bakery for their cake. Now, on the other side, California's Civil Rights Department and LGBTQ+ advocates contend that this isn't about forcing anyone to espouse a viewpoint. It's simply about equal access to the marketplace. They argue that when Kathy Miller opened a bakery selling cakes to the public, she assumed a legal duty to serve all members of that public, regardless of her personal beliefs about them. From their perspective, Miller's policy, by definition, harms the dignity of LGBTQ customers by marking them as second-class citizens in commerce. If every business could opt out of serving groups they disfavor by claiming some expressive or religious rationale, anti-discrimination laws would be rendered meaningless. Today, the issue is gay rights. But tomorrow, it could be a restaurateur refusing an interracial couple, or a landlord refusing to rent to an unwed mother, all under the banner of free speech or religion. These laws exist to prevent exactly that patchwork of exclusion, and they need to stay intact. It's worth noting here that the Supreme Court's 303 creative ruling left some ambiguity, which savvy litigants on both sides are now probing. Justice Gorsuch took pains to say that the decision was not an open license to discriminate and was limited to expressive goods and services, which we still don't have a clear definition of. In fact, the 303 creative majority insisted they do no such thing as grant a general right to refuse protected customers. So where is that line? The California appellate judges essentially say baking a standard cake is not considered expressive. So no free speech exemption there. But what about a highly custom cake with elaborate artwork or a wedding photographer's work? Photography is often considered artistic expression. These scenarios are playing out as well. In Oregon, the owners of Sweet Cakes by Melissa, famous for refusing to bake for a lesbian wedding back in 2013, are still fighting their case, which the Supreme Court remanded back after the 303 creative case for another look. They're hoping the new precedent will finally absolve them. Wow. Talk about choosing your battles, man. In New York, a photographer named Emily Carpenter, who sued for the right to decline same-sex weddings, had initially lost. But after 303 Creative a federal appeals court breathed new life into her free speech claim and sent the case back for further proceedings. You're noticing the trend here, guys? Gals, theys, thems. This is all unraveling right before us. The court agreed she could have a valid free speech objection under 303, though they haven't given her a full win just yet. And in Kentucky, surprise, surprise, a photographer named Chelsea Nelson won a trial court order exempting her from Louisville's Fairness Ordinance so that she could advertise and say that she won't photograph same-sex weddings. That case became tangled in procedural questions, and she moved out of the state, raising issues of mootness. But it shows how these preemptive challenges have spread across this nation as a result of 303 Creative. All of these cases are pushing one fundamental question. Where do we draw the boundary between an individual's freedom to express or not express their beliefs and the public's right to equal treatment? It's a classic clash of values in our pluralistic society. And in each courtroom, judges are grappling with what 303 Creative means for a florist or a baker or a calligrapher, you name it. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit more on the legal arguments here. The legal arguments really stemming between two different categories: free speech versus anti-discrimination. Let's break down the legal debate in a very clear and straightforward way so that you can understand this and you can also become more armed with information about this particular precedent. The religious liberty and free speech side say, I'm not discriminating against the person. I'm just choosing which messages I will promote. In their view, a wedding vendor is not just selling a product. They're participating in the expressive celebration of a ceremony. For someone like Kathy Miller, making a custom wedding cake, even a plain one, for a gay couple's reception feels like an endorsement of that marriage. They argue the First Amendment protects you from having to voice support for something you disagree with. So the slogan here is, government can't force me to say or create something against my beliefs. They often cite that famous line, if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official can prescribe what shall be orthodox in matters of opinion. This is derivative from a case, West Virginia versus Barnett, where the court said students can't be forced to salute the flag and recite the pledge. The 303 Creative decision heavily relied on analogies. Y'all know from like the 10 that I gave y'all with these hypotheticals, but let me remind you, just as we wouldn't force a Muslim artist to draw the church's message or a gay singer to perform at an anti-gay rally, they say we shouldn't force a Christian baker to celebrate a gay wedding. They also stress that religious beliefs about marriage are sincerely held and not equal to baseless prejudices. These folks often serve LGBTQ customers in other contexts. As Miller's side notes, she'll sell cupcakes or birthday cakes to anyone. It's just the wedding context that she objects to. So they contend, allowing this narrow exemption won't erase gay people by any means. It just prevents the state from compelling speech. And as long as alternative providers exist, the next bakery down the street that Kathy was talking about, the impact on the couple is minimal, Miller's lawyers argue. Forget the trauma, forget the humiliation, forget the discrimination of it all. All right. That's one side. Now let's look at the second side of the house. The anti-discrimination and equal access side. Now this side responds, discrimination is discrimination. You can dress it up as a message, but it's still treating some customers worse than others because of who they are. They point out that any act of discrimination could be framed as a message if we allow this dodge. A restaurant could say, we're not barring Black customers. We just won't host interracial wedding dinners because that event conflicts with our beliefs. A hotel could claim, renting a room to an unmarried straight couple would endorse cohabitation, sin. You get it. If those sound far-fetched to you, note that similar arguments were floated in the civil rights era and uniformly rejected by courts as a slippery slope to eroding civil rights altogether. The equal access camp emphasizes that public accommodations like Colorado's, California's, etc., they are designed precisely to prevent marginalized groups from being denied service. These laws came about to dismantle the humiliating experiences of, let's say, African Americans traveling and seeing whites only signs, or same-sex couples more recently being denied basic services. If everyone can claim an expressive exception, these protections become Swiss cheese. Legally, they argue that providing a service isn't the same as endorsing the customer's beliefs, which I believe to be true. I think that's just a clear fact, in my honest opinion. When a bakery sells a cake, it's the couple's message that this cake celebrates their marriage, not the baker's. The state law doesn't force the baker to write, "Gay marriage is great, love the gays," on the cake. It just says, don't turn down the couple because of their sexuality. From this perspective, baking or photographing or flower arranging for a wedding is a commercial service, not your personal manifesto. They also highlight the dignitary harm inflicted. Being refused service because of who you are is a real injury. I know firsthand, even if you find another vendor. It's the stigma and stress of being treated as unequal. Recall the earlier story of Mullins and Craig, how a brief encounter of rejection left lasting scars of worry and shame. They didn't even want to utter the word husband out in public spaces. Society, in their view, decided long ago that the cost to an individual's conscience of doing business within the law is outweighed by the cost to society of permitting discrimination. No shirt, no shoes, no service. Heard that one before? Fine. No straights, no gays, no service. Not fine. In court, these translate to dueling legal tests. The free speech side wants strict scrutiny, the toughest test for the government to meet, arguing the law compels content and viewpoint-based speech. The civil rights side says this isn't about speech at all. It's a neutral law regulating conduct, the conduct of sales, and only incidentally affecting expression, which normally gets a weaker test. Thus far, 303 Creative suggests the Supreme Court is leaning toward the former framing, at least for clearly expressive services. But even that decision acknowledged that not all applications of anti-discrimination law raise First Amendment problems. The majority spoke of a measure of refinement to ensure sincerely expressive businesses get protection while ordinary businesses remain subject to the law. So now we're left with a bit of a complicated puzzle. Which businesses count as expressive speakers and which do not? How is that being measured? Whose job is that to determine? Questions that need answers. So let's step away from the legal jargon and talk about what these cases mean in real life for LGBTQ people, for religious individuals, and for the public at large. For my fellow LGBTQ individuals, the stakes are profoundly personal. Anti-discrimination laws are a shield that guarantees we can lead ordinary lives. Booking a venue, hiring a caterer, getting a haircut, without the fear of being humiliated or refused. When those shields are weakened or taken away, there's going to be a ripple effect. Even one high-profile case of "we don't serve gays here" can send a chilling message. People might avoid certain businesses or entire towns, worried they'll face rejection or harm. It can resurrect that old feeling from before such protections of having to check the room and see if it's safe to disclose who you are. We heard David Mullins describe this exact feeling after his cake incident. He became hesitant to mention his husband over the phone when dealing with service providers because suddenly he wasn't sure how freely he could exist without encountering bias. The psychological toll of that kind of vigilance is real. It's like a tax on your dignity and peace of mind. There's also the community impact. Consider a small town where maybe only one bakery or one photographer is readily available. If that business puts up a sign tomorrow saying, "We don't do same-sex marriages," something Lori Smith in 303 Creative specifically sought to do on her website, what message does that send to younger queer folks in that town? Even if they personally aren't getting married right now, it's a very public statement. Your love is not equal here. This can enforce stigma and minority stress. On a broader scale, LGBTQ advocates worry that these court-sanctioned exceptions provide a roadmap to roll back equality in more and more areas. Today, it's weddings. Tomorrow, could it be refusing to provide counseling to a gay teen? Or denying fertility treatment to a lesbian couple? There have been cases along those lines too. For instance, some doctors have argued for religious rights not to provide certain treatments to LGBTQ patients, though so far, courts haven't given a broad okay to that under anti-discrimination laws. Now, from the perspective of the religious business owners, these fights are existential in a different way. People like Kathy Miller or Lori Smith will tell you they face a Sophie's choice, if you will. Violate the law and risk ruinous fines, or violate your conscience and soul. Kathy Miller has said this legal battle has been lengthy and stressful. She's poured time and money, with help from advocacy groups, into defending her stance. Some others in her shoes have simply closed up shop rather than comply. For these owners, it's about being able to live out their faith, not just in private worship, but in their public vocation. They feel if the state can compel them here, It sets a precedent that might one day force, say, a pro-life baker to design cakes with abortion rights slogans, or an atheist printer to make church flyers. They ask, shouldn't America be big enough for pluralism? For a few businesses that won't do X and plenty that will? Those are sincere concerns. But here's a very critical point. When you open a business to the public, the long-standing social contract since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is that you serve the public in all its diversity. You can't claim the benefits of operating in the marketplace, earning money from people of all walks, and then pick and choose who is worthy of basic respect. The counter argument from the religious side is, I will serve everyone, just not every event or message. That nuance, it might feel compelling to some, but to the person turned away, it often feels like a distinction without a difference. Eileen and Maria didn't go to Tastries asking for a gay pride cake or something political. They just wanted what any other straight couple could buy off the shelf. The fact that their cake was refused inherently labeled them as second class in that transaction. We also have to mention the slippery slope of fear. If the Supreme Court ultimately extends the 303 creative logic too far, we could see a patchwork of "we don't serve fill in the blank" signs creep back, so long as a business can argue that their service has some expressive element. Could a fancy restaurant say their culinary creations are art and they won't cater, say, a same-sex rehearsal dinner? Could a jeweler refuse to engrave wedding rings for a lesbian couple because engraving is expressive? These sound extreme, but clever litigants, they could test these waters, and they are. Justice Gorsuch's majority tried to cabin it, but Justice Sotomayor clearly wasn't convinced. Hence her warning that this is a reactionary exclusion, hidden under free speech. There's evidence that most Americans don't actually want a broad license to discriminate in business settings. Polling reports after 303 Creative found about 65% of voters believe businesses should not be allowed to turn away customers over the owner's religious or personal beliefs, whether that customer is gay or of a certain race or religion. Even a plurality of Republicans in that poll agreed. So we're not going to use the Democrat versus Republican take here. It seems as a society we generally agree on the principle of equal service. But in the legal arena, the question is how to balance that principle with another cherished principle: freedom of belief and expression. So, where does that leave us? It leaves us awaiting the next moves here. California's Supreme Court will likely hear the Tastries case. If they rule against the bakery, as the appellate court did, Miller's team has signaled that they might try to take it to the US Supreme Court. Given the current Supreme Court's composition, you already know how I feel about this right now, and how many of us feel about this. But given their composition and the ruling that has taken place in 303 Creative, there is zero guarantee they'd even take the case. But if they do, it could become the next major showdown. Similarly, if the Emily Carpenter case in New York or others bubble up with conflicting outcomes, say one circuit court rules one way, another one rules differently, the Supreme Court could feel compelled to step in to resolve the confusion. At the end of the day, this is about lines. The line between speech and service. The line between religious freedom and equality. And the line society draws to say, this far, no further, to both government and individuals. In the coming months, keep an eye on these cases. They may not grab headlines like a Supreme Court decision, but in courtrooms in Fresno, in Albany, and elsewhere, judges are effectively sketching out the meaning of 303 Creative. And with it, the future of how someone's religious conviction can reshape the public marketplace. Overruled will stay on this story because it's rare that a Supreme Court decision has such quick and concrete ripple effects. We're literally watching precedent being forged in real time. The ink on 303 Creative is barely dry, and it's already being tested on the ground. Will the promise of free speech be interpreted in a way that undermines decades of anti-discrimination protections and civil rights advancements? Or will courts find a balance that respects genuine artistic freedom and preserves equal access? As is often the case, the most satisfying answer would be a win-win. But the nature of this conflict might make that elusive. For Eileen and Maria, by the way, there was a happy ending in one sense. They did get married and presumably got a cake from another bakery to celebrate with loved ones. But in a larger sense, their experience is now part of the legal record, fuel for a continuing battle over what equality looks like in a pluralistic America. As one law professor observed about the California ruling, this was not a great case for the bakery, because a generic cake is clearly not expressive speech. The harder cases are coming. We'll see if the courts can draw clear principles or if we end up with a patchwork where your rights depend on what state you're in or how artistic your job is. One thing's for sure. We haven't heard the last of weddings in the courtroom. The Supreme Court's 303 Creative decision has set the stage for this new act, and the final verdict on how far that precedent stretches is still pending. Will the First Amendment be interpreted as a sword to cut through anti-discrimination laws? Or can these two important values, free expression and equal service, coexist without one overruling the other? Stay tuned as we follow these cases and more on Overruled. This is the front line of the fight over the soul of public accommodation laws in post-303 Creative America. It's a story of faith and identity, rights and responsibilities. And friends, it is far, far from over. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back to lighten it up some. All right, y'all, welcome back. I hope that you got a great amount of information going over the 303 Creative case. So much to unpack. My God, we're gonna be on that one like a hawk. But anyway, I digress. Welcome back, and we are gonna jump into our third segment. Cite me, don't fight me. The segment where I dig into the legal code's attic, dust off the weirdest laws ever passed, and ask, who hurt the legislature that day? What were they going through? If you've ever wondered what the law says about pizza delivery, ghosts, or your sleepwear choices. Oh, baby, it's about to get delightfully messy. To kick things off, we're going to head back to my home state, Louisiana. Shout out to all my Louisiana listeners. Now, that's as far as I can go with giving compliments. This law, a series of revised statutes, made very clear and plain that the offense of unlawful ordering of goods or services, specifically sending deliveries to someone's home without their consent, is illegal. What caused that statute to be enacted, you may ask? Well, friends, it was a pizza. So, in Louisiana, they have stated in actual statutes, y'all, I can't believe this, absolutely no to unsolicited pizzas. And I think, personally, I would gladly accept a pizza if it was delivered to me. However, I do understand the concern. But then I also wonder, why did you even have to create this very specific law in the first place? I got more information for you. Hang tight. Under state law, it's literally a misdemeanor to order food or other services to someone's address if they didn't request it themselves. So if you were thinking about being petty and sending your ex 37 anchovy and onion pizzas as revenge, congratulations. That's now a crime with up to $500 in fines or 6 tender months in jail. Yeah, for pizza. This law was meant to stop pranks and harassment, but it raises some serious philosophical questions here, like, what happens if I just want to feed my friend, surprise them with something to eat because they said they haven't eaten yet? Am I supposed to text them first? Apparently, yes, in Louisiana. Consent culture applies to your carbs. Your Honor, I'm gonna do it. You already know something. Your Honor, I rest my slice. You're welcome. Okay, next, we're gonna head on over to New York, where a very interesting law came into place saying you must disclose if your house is haunted. So the precedent that established this was a case Stembovsky versus Ackley in 1991. So the ruling of that case denoted that a seller must disclose a haunting if they've publicized it or profited from the ghost story itself. Now, let me give you some more details. New York, truly, at this point, they have recognized haunted houses legally. And not just for Halloween aesthetics, for contract law purposes. In this landmark case, a buyer found out after the sale that the home had been heavily featured in local press as haunted. I'm not gonna hold you. I don't blame them for being pissed. I believe in spirits and energy transference in a home, and I would be OUT out before even seeing the house, let alone buying it. That's just me. Let me know if you on the same page as me, because I know I can't be the only one. Now, the court ruled that since the seller had benefited from the haunted reputation, even giving interviews about it, they couldn't pretend it wasn't relevant when selling the home. The judges said the seller had created a legally haunted house, and thus the buyer could back out. In legal terms, this was a material misrepresentation. In human terms, if you selling a conjuring house, you better disclose that shit. And last, we're gonna head on over to Minnesota, where allegedly a law exists through local ordinances, often cited in cities like St. Cloud, Minnesota. The offense itself? Sleeping in the nude. Now, I don't need to know all your business about how you sleep at night, but I do know that some people like to sleep naked. Just in general. This is nothing sexual. It's just a matter of feeling less encumbered. And it's cozy. So, hey, no judges here. While this one exists in more urban legend territory, multiple sources cite local Minnesota ordinances that prohibit sleeping in the nude, even in your own home. Now, is this enforced? Probably not. But the idea that somewhere in Minnesota, someone drafted actual legislation with the words, pajamas required by law. They must be working on a tight 15 because that is comedy. Let's be honest here. If you're shivering through a Midwestern winter, a la Ohio, a la Illinois, Minnesota, you're probably already wrapped up like a burrito. But the fact this was ever codified is wild. Who exactly was the state trying to protect? Someone got more than what they wanted to see, and they said, I want to be litigious about that. If this law's legit, I mean truly legit, then some people's bedtime routine just became a crime scene. And I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to have to do a perp walk naked or only in a bathrobe. And that's it for Cite Me, Don't Fight Me this week. Proof that legislatures have had their very unhinged eras too. Whether it's ghost real estate, pizza pranks, or policing pajamas, one thing is clear. The law is always full of receipts and ridiculousness. Got a weird law you want me to roast? Slide into the DMs at Overruled Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, or Blue Sky. Or email me at theoverruledpodcast@gmail.com. I might just cite you next. Let's take a quick break. And you already know what time it is. Objection, Your Honor. Let's go. All right, y'all. Welcome back. Come on back in the room. Take your seats. Get cozy. We are now stepping into Objection, Your Honor. This is where I pull up from the heart and call out the nonsense we've been told to just accept. Today's objection, it's personal, it's political, it's generational. Because I'm objecting to the smallness we're told to shrink ourselves into, especially when we dare to dream big. Sound good? Let's talk about it. From the time we're young, especially if you're Black, brown, queer, first generation, poor, or anything the world doesn't expect success from, we're taught to be realistic, not visionary, not bold, just realistic. Don't get your hopes up, they say. That's not for people like us. Family could even say. Be grateful with what you have. Stuff sounds familiar? I've heard it. I've felt it. And guess what? I've defied it. sometimes quietly, sometimes with Beyonce concert level fireworks and pyrotechnics. Here's the truth. The audacity to dream big is one of the most radical acts you can commit to when the world has already tried to limit you. And people will try you for it. They'll call your ambition delusional. They'll label your goals too much. Not because they see your future failing, but because they can't imagine your success. And baby, that is not your damn problem to carry. I'm not here for the smallness. Not anymore. I object. Because every inch I've grown, personally, professionally, spiritually, it's come from refusing to accept someone else's ceiling as my limit. In the law, we're taught to weigh precedent, but in life, sometimes you are the precedent. There might not be a roadmap for what you're building, but that doesn't mean it can't exist. In fact, a lot of laws, institution, and norms were never designed with folks like us in mind in the first place. So when we step into these spaces, we're not just challenging systems, we're actively expanding them. And let's not pretend the naysayers are always outside voices. Sometimes it's your own inner critic. That voice trained by years of microaggressions, missed opportunities, and moments where the dream felt too far off. But even then, even in those quiet moments of doubt, I say dream anyway. Bigger, wilder, with receipts, if you've got them, and pure faith if you don't. I think about the folks that I've met over the years. From law school applicants getting told, this school isn't for people like you, to entrepreneurs building something new from nothing, to creatives scared to take the big leap. And every single time, I remind them just as I remind myself, and I'm reminding you right now. You are allowed to want more than survival. You are allowed to design a life that looks nothing like the one you inherited. We didn't come this far just to play it safe. Don't start now. We came to expand what's possible, to make possible the impossible. So to every person listening who's been told to be realistic, be unreasonable, be relentless, be ridiculous if you have to. Because the world only moves forward when someone dares to ask, why not me? I'll say that again. The world only moves forward when someone dares to ask, why not me? Why not you? And to every naysayer in your past, present, or even inside your own head, kindly tell them, with all disrespect, I'm dreaming out loud, and I'm just getting started. This is your world. This is your life. Make the most of it. And collectively, the church says, amen. That's gonna wrap it up for this week's objection, Your Honor, okay? If you're dreaming big and folks keep trying to shrink your vision, you're probably doing something very correct. keep pushing, keep climbing. And when you hit that milestone, don't whisper about it. No, 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 no. Celebrate loudly. Okay? Celebrate loud and in color. Shout out to T.S. Madison. The world needs to see what unapologetic success looks like. And in this day and age, baby, more and more of us are tired of hearing that same damn song on the radio or watching that same being spewed on the TV. Kendrick told us, turn the TV off. Got your own objection to submit? A story, a rant, or a truth you are ready to speak? Email me at theoverruledpodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. You already know the deal. Overruled Podcast. On YouTube, The Overruled Podcast. You and I were made to dream out loud. Now let's go do it. Well, friends, that's going to be a wrap on this week's episode of Overruled, where we have unpacked the headlines, roasted the ridiculous, and I have reminded you that the law isn't just something that happens in courtrooms. It's something that shapes your every damn day. Whether you're dodging shady ghost listings on Zillow, challenging bakery bias in California, or just out here dreaming big despite every closed door. Hey, know this. You belong, your voice matters, and the table that we talked about before is just not big enough, so we building a whole new one. So stay bold, stay curious, stay loud. Y'all already know. That's what we're doing here. That's the community we're cultivating here at the Overruled Podcast. I want to thank you so much for listening. I am so happy to be, making more and more episodes, and I'm so humbled and appreciative of the kind words, feedback, and just support that I'm getting in doing this. It means the world to me, and it lets me know that this is something that people really want, and I love that, and I love you all. But don't get crazy, okay? All right. So, I gotta say it again because I need y'all to help me help you help us around here, okay? Slide over to Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, at Overruled Podcast. Follow us, share us, repost us, do whatever. Do your big one, please. Please, pretty please. My birthday's coming up, and I would love that as a birthday gift. Free. Anyway, also, catch us on YouTube, The Overruled Podcast. You know the drill. If you have legal rants or any weird laws you want me to look at or your own objection, shoot me an email, theoverruledpodcast@gmail.com. All right? And hey, last thing, I promise. If you liked this episode, rate us, share us, and leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. I need you to leave a 5-star review like you are swearing to it under oath in court yourself. That's how we grow, and it means the world to me. So, until next time, keep dreaming big, keep asking questions, never be afraid to object. This court is adjourned. Bye. Pop goes the weasel. We did that. We did that, y'all. Okay. Yeah. I'm here for it. I gotta tell y'all, I have been in like a flurry of work because I work my full-time job still. So, and will be continuing that. But I have just been like overflowing with like productivity And I'm appreciative of that because I didn't know how I would feel after um, doing several episodes and writing and all this. But I feel like it's really helped me and my focus has sharpened, which makes me believe that when law school starts, literally in a matter of weeks, we are gonna be off to the races. That's when y'all gonna get the real tea. But, until then, I'm giving you the other real tea, but I'm gonna give you some law school tea. That's what I'm very excited to start sharing with y'all. Um, I'm gonna take a sip of my Coke Zero. I need to go call my niece because, we've been playing phone tag for, like, the last 3 days, and I need to send her I have an old MacBook that I'm going to send her, because she's in college and she doesn't have a MacBook. But I'm like, "Girl, you can have this for free." So I'm gonna send that over to her, but Imma catch up with her on FaceTime real quick. And then I have some Indian food waiting on me tonight that has been sitting for a full 24 hours. So the girls who know that things with seasoning in it, they become even more amplified after it's settled. Oh, and I can't wait to load that up tonight. Ooh, yes. Okay. Yes, Lord, for the rest of our days. All right. That's all I got. For real, for real. This was another rendition, another iteration of the overruled afties, if you will. All right, y'all. Bye.